At the busy gates of JFK International Airport, the morning rush felt like a storm. Rolling suitcases rattled over tile floors, coffee cups steamed in anxious hands, and announcements echoed through the high ceilings like background noise in a movie. People moved fast, brushing past each other, eyes fixed on their destinations. But in the middle of all that noise and movement, something was about to happen, something that would bring everything to a stop. A black woman stood at the gate for Flight 842. She wore a simple, black leather jacket, dark jeans, and carried a modest backpack over her shoulder. Her posture was calm, her face composed. She handed her boarding pass to the flight attendant with a slight smile, the kind you give when everything seems to be going as planned, but it didn't go as planned. The flight attendant, a blonde woman with sharp features and a neatly pinned cap, didn't smile back. She squinted at the boarding pass like it was suspicious. Then she looked up and narrowed her eyes at the woman standing in front of her. "This ticket doesn't look right," she said, loud enough for the people in line to hear. The woman blinked slowly. "Excuse me?" "It's not scanning," the flight attendant added, shaking her head. "I think this might be a fake." Passengers behind her began to whisper. Some craned their necks to get a better view. A man in a red scarf scoffed and muttered, "Unbelievable." The woman remained still, her voice steady. "I assure you, this ticket is valid. I booked it myself through the airline's official site." But the flight attendant was already shaking her head. "You need to step aside." "No," the woman said, her voice a little firmer now. "I have a seat in first class." "Check again." "You're holding up the line, ma'am," the attendant snapped, clearly enjoying the power she thought she had. "Security, please." A nearby guard began to approach, and the tension in the air thickened like a storm cloud about to burst. People were watching now, phones slowly being raised, fingers hovering over record buttons. From behind the woman, a teenage boy probably no older than 16 watched the scene unfold. He wore a hoodie and carried a small duffel bag. He looked uncomfortable, his eyebrows drawn together. In front of him, a heavily pregnant white woman held onto a carry-on bag with both hands. She looked tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones. When the teen caught her eye, he quickly stood straighter and gently tapped her arm. "Ma'am, you can take my seat," he said quietly. She blinked in surprise. "Are you sure?" He nodded, giving her a small smile. "You look like you need it more than I do." Just a few feet away, the black woman still stood firm, now surrounded by murmurs and glances, some sympathetic, some skeptical. The flight attendant was now holding the ticket in one hand, waving it toward another uniformed staff member as if to say, "See? I told you so, but then—" The woman calmly reached into her bag. No panic, no trembling hands. She pulled out a small leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up for a moment. Everyone went silent. Because inside that wallet wasn't a credit card or ID. It was a government badge, a real one, embossed, shining. And powerful. The attendant blinked rapidly, her smug expression falling away in pieces. I didn't know." The woman looked her directly in the eyes. "That's the problem." Suddenly, the whispers turned into gasps. A few passengers put their phones down. Even the security guard, who had been just a step away from grabbing her arm, paused mid-stride, his eyes locked on the badge. Back in line, the pregnant woman eased herself into the seat the teenager had offered. She let out a breath of relief and looked up at him with tearful eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, but the teen didn't say anything. He was watching the woman with the badge, just like everyone else. Something about her presence demanded attention. "Not fear, but respect," the flight attendant stuttered. "I didn't mean to. I thought the ticket was ... The woman closed her wallet slowly, letting the silence settle. "You assumed. You didn't ask. You didn't check. And now ... She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone around her knew. There was more coming. Much more. Because this wasn't just about a boarding pass. This wasn't just about race. This was about power, prejudice, and accountability. And the entire airline was about to feel the weight of it. Just as the first-class doors were being prepped for boarding, A voice crackled through the airport speakers. "Will the operations manager for Gate 12 please report immediately?" The woman didn't move. She just waited, and while the rest of the terminal held its breath, the teenage boy sat quietly by the window, unaware that the pregnant woman he'd just helped was silently reaching into her purse, pulling out a note. A folded piece of paper, old and soft from being carried too long. She looked at the boy, then down at the note again, and pressed it gently into his hand. "Open this later," she whispered. "When you're alone." He stared at her, confused, but he nodded. Outside, a plane's engines rumbled to life. Inside, everything was changing, and no one, not the flight attendant, not the passengers, not even the airline itself, was ready for what was about to unfold next, because this woman's identity wasn't just unexpected. It was game-changing, and the story had only just begun. The silence around Gate 12 stretched on as if time had slowed. People weren't just watching anymore, they were listening. Listening to every breath, every word, every shift in body language. The woman, calm but commanding, had quietly shaken the entire space without raising her voice. No shouting, no scene, just presence. And that badge. The flight attendant now stood rigid, holding the boarding pass as though it might burn her fingers. The operations manager arrived seconds later, a short man in a navy suit, sweating despite the airport's cool air. His name tag read Martin. He took one look at the woman, glanced at the stiff flight attendant beside her, and instinctively adjusted his tie. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, though the question wasn't really for the woman, it was more a warning to his staff. "Yes," the woman replied, her tone even. "Your employee accused me of using a fake ticket. She refused to verify it properly and attempted to remove me from boarding despite my valid reservation. I've said nothing until now, but I've been watching how she treated other passengers, too." The passengers still in line shifted uncomfortably. A few looked at their phones, then at each other. Some began recording again, more discreetly this time. Martin nodded slowly, trying to stay neutral. "Ma'am, if we've made a mistake, I sincerely apologize." "I'm not interested in an apology," she interrupted. "I'm interested in accountability." Her words landed hard. She didn't need to raise her voice. Just saying them was enough. The flight attendant opened her mouth, trying to speak, but nothing came out. Her face had gone pale. Martin gave a short, awkward cough. "Perhaps we can step aside and speak privately?" But the woman didn't move. She simply looked at him. "Why would I do that? The humiliation happened here. In public, you don't get to clean it up in the back room." The tension thickened. A group of flight crew members nearby had stopped talking. A few feet away, the teenage boy still sat in silence, the folded note now tucked safely in his hoodie pocket. He hadn't opened it yet. He hadn't even told anyone the woman gave it to him. Something about the way she handed it over made it feel personal. Like it wasn't just paper, it was something heavy, important. The pregnant woman beside him kept glancing over at the situation unfolding near the gate, shaking her head slightly, whispering to herself. They really had no idea who they were dealing with. The boy leaned slightly toward her. "Do you know her?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Not personally, but I've heard of her. I think she's someone very high up, possibly federal. Like FBI or something? Something like that. But maybe even higher." The boy's eyes widened. Meanwhile, back at the gate, Martin was trying to control the situation, but his face said everything. He was nervous, worried. He kept checking his watch. Then the growing crowd. "Ma'am, please, can I see your identification again?" She didn't respond at first. Then, finally, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the wallet once more. This time, she opened it slowly, letting him take a good look. His eyes scanned the credentials, and his mouth dropped slightly. His lips moved, as if reading her title to himself, just to make sure he was seeing it right. Deputy Director, not airline staff, not even airport security, federal level, and not just federal executive. He swallowed hard. "You work with Homeland?" "No," she said calmly. "I oversee it." Martin's hands dropped to his sides. I had no idea. I'm so sorry." "Again," she said, "this is not about you being sorry. This is about why it happened at all." A woman nearby whispered, "Deputy Director of what?" And someone else replied, "She's like, above the people who run the airport, way above." The murmurs returned, now mixed with awe, fear, and a little shame. People were realizing they had just stood in line watching a powerful woman get questioned like she didn't belong just because of how she looked. The woman finally turned to the flight attendant. "Did you question the last 10 passengers this closely? Or just me?" The attendant looked like she wanted to disappear. "You had my ticket. You could have scanned it, verified it. Instead, you accused me, loudly, in front of everyone." The woman's voice never rose. That was the most unnerving part. Martin tried to step in again. "We'll investigate this immediately. Please allow us to upgrade your experience." "I already had a first-class seat," the woman said. "I don't need an upgrade. I need this culture changed." Her words echoed like a ripple in the air. The passengers who had judged her, who had rolled their eyes or made assumptions, now looked down at their feet. The ones who had filmed it now shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they had recorded truth or shame. The boy by the window glanced down at the note in his hoodie again, itching to read it but unsure if this was the right time. Something told him. "Wait, not yet." The pregnant woman beside him leaned back, her eyes closing for a moment. Then she whispered something so softly he almost missed it. "She's not just powerful, she's dangerous. But only to the people who don't do right." Just then, another announcement came overhead. "Flight 842 to Atlanta, now boarding first-class passengers." The gate agent, now quiet, now respectful, nodded toward the woman. "You may board." But she didn't move. Instead, she looked at Martin one last time. "There will be a follow-up. You'll be hearing from my office." He nodded quickly, fumbling for his phone. "Of course." She turned then, walking calmly through the gate, her shoulders high, her walk strong. The people around her made room, some stepping back, others staring. She didn't look at them, and just as she disappeared through the jetway, the teenage boy finally reached into his pocket. He unfolded the note slowly. His fingers trembled a little. It wasn't long, just a few lines, but when he read it, his mouth fell open and his life began to change. Because the note wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone who already knew everything about him and had been waiting for the right moment to reach out. He looked up, wide-eyed, and that's when everything started to unravel. Passengers in nearby seats were still whispering, throwing sideways glances at the woman who had just reclaimed her place in first class. Her calm posture didn't match the chaos they'd just witnessed, and that contrast made her presence feel even more mysterious. The flight attendants moved about the cabin stiffly, now less confident, more cautious, as if they were trying to undo a mess they didn't fully understand. The air had changed. Whatever assumptions had been floating around about who belonged where had cracked wide open. And yet, no one knew what was coming next. A young girl seated across the aisle tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, why?" Did they think her ticket was fake? Her mother whispered something inaudible and then looked straight ahead, clearly avoiding eye contact with the woman in question. There was a quiet tension, now a fragile stillness where curiosity, guilt, and confusion all mingled, but behind that quiet exterior, the woman whose name they still didn't know was calculating. Not in a cold way, but in a careful one. She stared out the window, her fingers gently clasped around the armrest, not saying a word, but her mind, it was running fast. She wasn't someone who liked to make scenes, but she'd learned long ago that staying silent in the face of humiliation could cost more than speaking up ever would. Her name was Dr. Liana Carter. Only a handful of people on the flight or even at the airport would have recognized her name, and yet that name carried weight in places most people couldn't even imagine. She had walked into secret military briefings, advised world leaders on tech infrastructure, and helped design AI systems that were reshaping global security. But here, none of that had mattered. Here, to some, she was just a black woman in an expensive coat. She had boarded with her ticket scanned like everyone else, taken her seat like everyone else. But because she didn't match their picture of what a first-class traveler looked like, it had turned into a public interrogation. That assumption, that presumption had cut deeper than the flight crew realized. And as much as she tried to breathe through it, she couldn't ignore the ache of old memories it stirred up. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last dot. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have guessed, was who else had seen everything unfold, 2 rows behind her. In economy, a man in a navy blue suit had been watching the entire scene closely. He had removed his sunglasses the moment the flight attendant began raising her voice. He didn't move, didn't intervene, didn't even blink much, but he saw it all. And he wasn't just any passenger. His name was Mr. Daniel Armitage, Executive, Director of Strategic Operations at Global Wings, the international airline they were flying on. He had boarded last minute under an alias. He often did that to monitor how his airline staff treated everyday customers. He wanted to witness their professionalism, or lack thereof, without the filters of press releases or polished reports. This was a routine quality control trip. For him, until now, Daniel sat still, rubbing his chin slowly, replaying every word he heard from the cabin crew. His mind sharpened when he saw the look of embarrassment on Dr. Carter's face. Not anger embarrassment. And when he noticed the change in the energy of the cabin, the hush that followed, he knew this incident would reach far beyond this flight, but there was more. Someone else had taken notice. Further down the aisle, in seat 18F, a young black teen named Yelin was fidgeting in his seat. He had watched the whole confrontation unfold with wide eyes and a pounding heart. He hadn't said anything either, but something about the way the woman carried herself reminded him of his own Mother Grace under pressure. Strength without having to shout. It had rattled him. Yalin was traveling alone for the first time. His mom had saved up for this flight so he could visit his aunt in Chicago and tour a college campus. She had taught him to always be respectful, to mind his business, and to hold his head high no matter how people looked at him. But watching that scene in first class made him wonder if that would ever be enough. The woman didn't yell. She didn't make threats, but the way she sat back down, it was like she knew something no one else did. Like she was holding back power no one could see. And that stuck with JLEN. He looked down at the folded piece of paper in his lap. The scholarship essay he'd been rewriting for days. He had been stuck on the last sentence. Now he felt like he might know what it needed. But first, something else caught his attention. A few rows ahead of him, a pregnant woman in discomfort was trying to reposition herself, breathing heavily as she tried to stretch her legs in the cramped space. Without hesitation, Yalin stood up. "Ma'am, you can take my seat. You'll be more comfortable by the window." The woman blinked in surprise. "Are you sure?" He smiled shyly. "Yeah, it's okay, I don't mind." Other passengers watched quietly as the woman took his seat with a grateful nod. She thanked him and leaned over to say something else, but then paused, as if choosing her words carefully. After a moment, she whispered, "That was very kind. I hope someone sees that." Yalin didn't think much of it. He just nodded and moved to the aisle jump seat, where a flight attendant reluctantly allowed him to sit temporarily, back in first class. Dr. Carter closed her eyes for a moment. Her phone buzzed on her lap. A secure message popped up on the screen. She opened it and saw one line, "Armitage is on board." Her heart skipped. So he had seen. For a brief moment, her eyes flicked across the aisle and met his. Neither of them spoke. But in that fleeting glance, something passed between them, a silent confirmation, a promise of accountability. And just like that, this flight was no longer about getting from point A to point B. It was about something much bigger. Power had been revealed. Lines had been crossed. And soon, the entire airline would be forced to answer for what happened before takeoff. But no one on that flight, passengers, crew, or executives, knew just how far the consequences would reach, because in the next few hours, a press release would shake corporate boardrooms. In the next few days, hidden truths would unravel. And in the next few weeks, headlines around the world would be talking about one woman, one teenager, and a note that changed everything. But for now, they were just mid-air, and the storm was still gathering. The air inside the terminal had grown tense. People glanced over their shoulders, whispering to one another. The staff at the gate had now gone silent. They weren't talking to the woman anymore, no fake apologies, no more smugness. They just stood there, stiff, suddenly unsure of themselves. One of them, the supervisor in the dark blue suit, pulled out a phone and walked several paces away, speaking into it in hushed tones. The gate agents looked like they'd seen a ghost. The woman who moments ago had been accused of carrying a fake boarding pass wasn't yelling, wasn't crying. She stood calm, steady, her eyes locked on the agent who had called her out. But it was the security officer who had grabbed her arm earlier who looked most uncomfortable now. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, jaw clenched, no longer making eye contact. He clearly hadn't expected this. "Ma'am," one of the agents said finally, voice trembling slightly, "would you mind stepping into the VIP holding lounge just for a moment? We just want to clear something up." The woman didn't move. She tilted her head slightly and said in a firm, clear voice, "You've already checked my ID, you've already scanned my pass. Tell me, what exactly are you trying to clear?" "Up now?" No one answered her. Passengers had now pulled out their phones, some recording quietly from a distance. The buzz of the crowd grew louder. There were murmurs of, "She's someone important," and "They're in big trouble." From the far end of the terminal, a sharply dressed man came rushing in, briefcase in hand, his pace brisk but controlled. His badge swung from his neck, catching the light. He approached the gate counter and whispered something to the supervisor. The supervisor's eyes widened as he looked back and forth between the man and the woman. Then the man approached her directly. "Dr. Elise Warren?" he asked. The woman gave a subtle nod. "I apologize on behalf of the entire airline. There has been a serious misunderstanding. Please, come with me. We have a private suite ready for you upstairs. Your jet will be delayed just a few minutes while we accommodate the proper—" But she raised a hand to stop him. "Why didn't your staff recognize me?" He hesitated, then answered quietly, "They weren't briefed. Protocol was broken. This will be addressed." Everyone watching from the terminal now had wide eyes. "Did he say jet?" someone whispered. "Private jet?" But even more curious was the name that had just been spoken, Dr. Elise Warren. The young black teen who had offered his seat to the pregnant white woman earlier had been quietly watching the scene from a few rows away. He didn't have first-class privileges, but something about the way Elise had handled the confrontation had reminded him of his mother, calm, powerful, never raising her voice. And now, as he heard her name, something clicked. He remembered it from somewhere, a documentary, a panel, maybe even a Forbes magazine cover in a barbershop waiting room. Dr. Elise Warren wasn't just anybody. She was the tech architect behind one of the largest aviation cybersecurity systems in the world. A system this very airline had been integrating. No wonder everyone had suddenly frozen. But while the drama played out, the boy turned to check on the pregnant woman he'd given his seat to. She was now seated comfortably in first class, tears in her eyes. He wasn't sure, with gratitude, maybe, or something more. Back at the gate, the airline official was still trying to manage the storm. "If you'd like to reschedule, Dr. Warren, we can arrange an immediate charter flight anywhere you'd prefer." "I'll stay on this flight," she said. "But not before I speak to every single person here who thought my presence in first class was a mistake." The crowd now was completely silent. The woman stepped forward, eyes scanning each staff member, security, gate agents, supervisors. "This is what happens," she said, "when you decide what someone can't be based on what you think they look like." Her voice was low, firm, every word measured. "You thought I was lying. You thought I didn't belong here. And instead of apologizing when you saw the truth, you tried to hide it. But you didn't just insult me, you disrespected every young black girl who's ever dreamed of sitting where I do." The silence in the terminal was thick now. Nobody dared interrupt her. Not even the staff. "I'll get on that plane," she said finally, "but I won't forget today." She turned and walked calmly through the boarding tunnel on her own terms. As the passengers began boarding behind her, many with their heads down, the teen boy stood still for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and searched for Dr. Elise Warren. The results were almost immediate. MIT graduate. Former aerospace engineer. Founder of SkySecure Inc., investor, activist, and as it turned out, one of the top shareholders in the airline everyone was currently flying on. He blinked, still holding the screen, trying to take it all in. At that moment, the same security guard who had grabbed Elise's arm earlier walked by, no longer smug, no longer stern. Just quiet. As he passed the boy, their eyes met for a second. Neither said a word, but behind them, the whispers continued. That's when the boy's phone vibrated. A message, unknown number. He opened it slowly. The message said only, "We saw what you did. We'd like to speak with you, room 4 after the flight." His brows furrowed. He looked up. The pregnant woman was now asleep, hand resting gently on her belly. He didn't know it yet, but the seat he gave up was about to change everything, not just for her, but for him too, and what waited in room 4D. That ... was something no one on that flight could have predicted. She hadn't even made it to the gate yet when a second supervisor showed up. A tall man in a dark blue airline blazer with a badge that read, Senior Operations Lead Gregory T. He approached with a brisk walk, face tight and unreadable. The young gate agent whispered something in his ear, and his expression instantly hardened as he turned to look at the black woman now standing calmly with her boarding pass held out. Gregory didn't bother introducing himself. "Ma'am, we're going to have to verify your identity. Can you come with us to the private holding area?" Passengers nearby were now whispering louder. Phones were starting to point in their direction again, and this time one woman even asked, "Are they detaining her? For what?" She didn't flinch. She looked Gregory directly in the eyes. "I've already been verified at check-in, at TSA, and again at the lounge entrance. What exactly do you need to verify, sir?" Gregory glanced at the boarding pass, then back at her face and muttered something under his breath, something that sounded dangerously close to disbelief. This first-class seat was issued under an executive program. High priority, secure list. That's why we need to double-check. This isn't standard procedure for regular passengers. Someone behind her gasped. Regular passengers. The tension in the terminal was rising like steam in a kettle. And just then, the young black teen, the same one who had earlier given up his seat to the pregnant woman, reappeared. He had gone to get a snack, but stopped dead in his tracks when he saw what was unfolding. He stepped closer to get a better view, brows furrowed. Something didn't sit right. Then the pregnant woman, now seated and sipping a bottle of water, slowly turned toward the commotion. When she spotted the woman being cornered by 2 airline staff, her eyes widened. She stood up with effort and made her way toward the group, placing a hand gently on the black woman's arm. "She's with me," the pregnant woman said confidently. "Is there a problem?" Gregory looked confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "Who are you?" She handed him her own boarding pass. "Dr. Amanda Reed, former Federal Aviation Security Advisor. I was just speaking with her in the lounge about cybersecurity risks in airline infrastructure. She's actually the one the FAA called in to lead the task force," gasps again. This time, louder. The gate agent paled. Gregory's lips parted slightly. I see." But the black woman didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her silence was power now. Her eyes moved slowly across the terminal. People were watching, recording, judging. But what no one realized, what was still hidden, was the real reason she was traveling today. Because just 2 hours earlier, a confidential meeting had been held in Washington. A security breach had been detected in the airline's own software, a breach that could expose millions of customer records and even affect global aviation networks. The FAA had authorized a covert audit by a private, elite cybersecurity expert, someone with clearance above top-secret level, someone with experience in military-grade data defense. That someone was her, and her mission was time-sensitive, but now, here she was, standing in an airport terminal, being questioned like a fraud, her role undermined. Her dignity challenged, all because of the way she looked. The pregnant woman leaned closer and whispered, "I can say more if you want me to." "They're crossing a line," but the woman shook her head gently. "Not yet." Meanwhile, the black teen stood nearby, fists clenched. He couldn't believe how quickly respect could turn to doubt, how status meant nothing when skin color entered the equation. He had just seen this woman in the VIP lounge, had heard the staff address her with professional courtesy. Now that public eyes were on her, everything changed, and then, suddenly, an airline director's voice came through the terminal speakers. Attention all passengers on Flight 722 to Boston. This is Director Elaine McCarthy. Please note there will be a brief delay due to an urgent systems update. We appreciate your patience, the black woman blinked. Her eyes narrowed. That systems update wasn't routine. That was a silent message. Her team had already begun probing the breach. And they must have found something. She turned to Gregory and the gate agent, voice calm but firm. Gentlemen, I'm not going to miss this flight. You can either let me board, and we finish this quietly, or I'll have to place a direct call to Washington. And then I won't be the only one answering questions. Gregory's lips twitched. Washington? She pulled a small, flat black ID case from her purse. No words, just flipped it open, a golden seal, a code. A clearance level they weren't supposed to even know existed. Gregory stepped back slightly. The gate agent's knees actually wobbled. Still, Gregory tried one more time to play it safe. But your name wasn't on the pre-cleared. My name was wiped from pre-clearance. That's how high the risk level is, she cut him off. It's called stealth authorization. And you just compromised it by making this public. Now the tension was unbearable. No one could look away. The teenager's eyes were wide. The pregnant woman stared, speechless. People who were moments ago recording for social media slowly lowered their phones, suddenly aware this might be more serious than a racial profiling incident. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a live event. Something bigger than anyone expected, but just as the moment seemed to reach its breaking point, a man in a dark suit approached from the side headset in ear, expression unreadable. He held out his hand. I believe you've been waiting for me, he said to the black woman, her eyes locked onto his. She gave the faintest nod. The man turned to Gregory. She's with us, full clearance, effective immediately. Let her board. Gregory didn't argue, but what none of them realized, yet not Gregory, not the crowd, not even the man in the dark suit, was that someone had been watching this from the airline's internal security room. Watching and taking notes because the breach? It wasn't just Digital Dot and the people behind it? They were already on that very flight, but no one knew that yet.